Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush, Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 32 of the Relationship Series. This week I'm joined by my good friend Morten Hake. Morten Hake is based in Oslo in Norway. He goes by many titles and he's been called many things over the years. I'm simply going to introduce him as a state of mind expert and someone who's had a lot of experience in the personal development world and especially around relationships. So I'm really looking forward to having him on the podcast with us today. Welcome, Morten.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Ankush.
I'm really looking forward to it. Before we start and we get into talking about state of mind and relationships, I know you've had quite a journey to get to where you are today. And I know some of the people listening to this will be aware of you and know who you are, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't know too much about you. So for those who don't, could you give us a bit of a background in terms of what your, I guess for better terms, would be your career path to date, especially the early years? I think that'd be quite interesting for people.
Yeah, sure. I always get, it's a challenge for me to go through my story sometimes. I don't know, just because part of it might be embarrassing to me sometimes, but at the same time, I'm really proud and I try to choose which bits to tell people that are relevant in a way. But I'll just jump into it. So I dropped out of college. Let's start there. I dropped out of college. College times. I was introduced to the game, and which is this seduction community where guys, try to learn how to pick up chicks. And I got so interested in this, and actually more than just I think the feeling of inspiration that it was possible for me to actually connect, that's always probably where I came from. I wanted to connect with women. Long story short is I joined this 6-month intensive coaching program where I wanted to become a dating instructor and teach guys how to meet and attract and connect with women. So I dropped out of college to join this program and moved to Oslo. And then during this time, our coach and mentor at the time was really the Tony Robbins style of personal development, go hard or go home type of approach. And we spent a lot of time, masterminding, reading books, pushing our comfort zones in different areas, and constantly being on that come up. You know what I mean? That up and come. Everything was success, and my head was filled with success all the time, and I just wanted to become best in everything. And during that time, I blogged, and it wasn't long until that little project became pretty popular in Norway. There was this big article written about us, and all of a sudden my blog was read. Guys were reading my blog. So then I kind of saw a potential there to maybe this was something I actually could create a career out of, and maybe there's something I actually could make a living of. And I remember back at that time, I was inspired by Steve Pavlina's blog. I knew that he made a living from writing on that blog. And really fast, I got into personal development and psychology and how peak performance and kind of how, trying to figure out how the mind works, which obviously we'll touch a lot upon. And then I went to Denmark after this coaching period to kind of join my mentor and his business. Continued there, but branched off into my own business went back to Norway and was still interested in like this personal development aspect. So that's been kind of like where I wanted to really take the bigger leap in a sense. I don't know how to say this, but point being was that I created this conference and for the readers of my blog called the MortenHake.com Summit, which later renamed to Morten Hake Summit.
And just for the listeners here, you know, how many people used to come to this sort of thing, just to give people a perspective? So you're a guy, you've dropped out of college, you fall into wanting to attract women and then into personal development, and then now you're starting a summit, and you're still quite young at this age, right?
Yeah. I was 21, I think, when I started the first year, and we had 160, 70 people there, and speakers from all over the world, you know, all talking about flirting, sex, seduction, and some personal development. But at that point, it was like really, yeah, so... And then we did that for 4 years. Me and Knut, you know Knut as well, Knut Johansen, a friend of mine, we kind of like built that, worked on building my personal brand. And also we had this intense coaching program called the Passion Immersion, where we brought people in. We moved people into an apartment together and work with them intensely every day for 4 months. And it was at the 4th annual summit where Jamie Smart was going to speak. And I had met Jamie in 2007, 2008, and this was in 2013. So I thought Jamie was going to talk about NLP. And kind of like that was... to be honest, I hadn't done my research. Like, I hadn't done my proper research. I just assumed that, you know, running one of the biggest NLP companies, he would talk about NLP. That was in my mind. I think Knut did most of that scheduling and stuff. So, but he came and when he spoke on the stage, I was sitting there listening, and I was just like noticing that I relaxed, but I couldn't really put my finger on what he was describing, you know, like I couldn't form it in my mind. I wouldn't be able to retell it, but I knew I felt good, and I knew that what he said kind of made sense, you know. I didn't have any objections, you know, if you know what I mean. And after he spoke, everyone was just like so quiet, and I was quiet. And when I say quiet, I don't necessarily mean... I just mean that everyone was peaceful, you know? It was just a different vibe in the room. So I talked to Jamie. We instantly set up a workshop and filled the workshop pretty fast. And... he came back to Norway a couple of weeks later, and we did the workshop. And during that workshop, it was one of the big aha moments for me when I realized that we're actually feeling our thinking and not the content of our thinking. And just hearing that was huge to me, because I didn't hear it in a way that I've heard something like that before. I heard it in a completely new way.
So just for anyone that's really new to, maybe this is the first podcast they've listened to, maybe they're new to these principles behind state of mind, could you say a little bit more about what's the difference between feeling your thinking versus feeling the content of your thinking? What did you hear?
Yeah, totally. For me, it was when I heard those words, and when I really saw it for myself, is that we kind of are both creating and experiencing our experience in the moment. You know, we're going, it's like we're being thunk in a way. That's how I see it, at least. It's like we go through our days, and we thoughts is running through our minds like cars on a highway, and then we have awareness to be able to, you know, be aware of this, and then we feel what's on our mind in the moment. So, and that feeling looks real to us, or what we experience obviously looks real to us. This is real, you know, this is the reality we know as real. So when we're in a circle, say we're our friend says something to us, you know, he says, you're always shy, you know, that could be a statement. And that's just an example, you know, we can experience that scenario in a multiple kinds of ways, you know, like how we experience that is all created from within. And it really is created from within. Like that means, and that's 100% of the time. That's just a principle. It's an absolute. It works that way. It works the way that we're actually creating our experience from the inside out. And it changes everything. It's a complete new paradigm, because when seeing that we experience an inside job, if you know what I mean, like we're experiencing our own experience, then all of a sudden it drops the weight of when we are feeling shitty, to be honest with you, you know, and I'm not saying that realizing this will have us feel good at all times. I'm just saying that moods comes in waves, and our default setting, you know, our default is always tranquility and happiness. Or it's like I look at it like, sorry, I'm ranting here, but I'm just like trying to get my metaphors out. Yeah, so it's like, it brings me back to the moment, you know, it brings me back to the present. It brings me back to this, and it brings me back to me, you know, it brings me back to not necessarily blaming other people, the past, the future, or circumstance or events. All of a sudden, when that knowledge of this new paradigm in psychology, you know, that knowledge hits me like a brick again and again, and it reminds me, just like you get reminded of gravity, if you know what I mean. Like it's just a fact that's part of my reality now. So when I get reminded that it's an inside out world, then all of a sudden I don't have to blame anyone anymore. I don't have to blame the circumstance. I don't have to change the circumstance in order to feel a certain way, because I am the feeling, you know, it's already there.
There are a few things that make this quite interesting for me, and hopefully for the listeners, is that I find that when I share a lot with people who are new to this understanding, or new to the, you know, state of mind principles that you and I teach, it can sound very similar to a lot of stuff that's already out there. People kind of get glimpses of what we're pointing to. And what I really like about your story is that you were someone who not only had been around self-development, I mean, I'd been around self-development for a number of years, but you were also teaching, you were hosting conferences, you were coaching people, and like you were saying, I remember you had books and books and books on success and audio tapes and everything else, and this was a real game changer for you.
It was huge. It was 180 degrees flip of my entire life and entire business. And I say that you know, and I'm trying to describe how I felt about it, because it was a huge chapter change for me personally. So it's and I've heard some others use this as well, like everything changes and then nothing changed at the same time. But yeah, it was definitely huge for me. It was, to me, the whole idea that I needed to be anywhere else than where I was dropped. Just from knowing that I'm actually, because I always wanted to get somewhere, you know? I always wanted to get to the grass that was greener on the other side. And then realizing this, I all of a sudden realized that I was on a grass, you know, and then my grass is fine, and nurturing my own grass is way more effective.
So let's so thank you for that, and let's move on a little bit to talking about relationships, because again, the conferences you organize were very much on male-female dynamics and relationships and dating. And how did your life change around that? You know, so you understand that the role of thought in your experience of life. How did that impact your relationships?
Well, I can see how my communication changed, and it changed the way I communicate with my friends and my family. And I can see the change in my family. I used to worry a lot, you know. I wasn't present because my mind was running. So while I was with my family, my mind was busy thinking about work or thinking about, you know, everything, all my worries and overthinking about stuff. And the same with clients, the same with my closest friends, the same with people I meet on a general basis. But realizing the thought-feeling connection and having thought in the equation all the time changes the present moment, and all of a sudden I can choose what I'm focused on instead of believing that I have to fix something in my head while at the same time trying to listen, you know. So it was a game changer in just that aspect of communication and eye contact, you know, just a simple, normal, being able to be there in the moment. And also, like, being okay with being insecure, because my thoughts can run at a gazillion miles an hour, and at the same time I can be okay with that, because I know that it's a thought marathon, you know. It's just thoughts, and when I get reminded of that, boom, I fall into the present again, or it pulverizes. It just, apparently it doesn't make sense for me to engage in it anymore. And when I say engage in it, I mean my insecure thinking. Because a lot of times before, I thought that my insecure thinking in social settings or in relationships was something I needed to fix in order to have a better relationship. But the cool thing I started seeing was that connection was already there. You know, there was nothing to create. It was just part of, I don't know, the co-creation is just a natural, it's just life unfolding, and then we have an experience of it in the moment. And that experience can be any kind of form. It's almost like we go through life and there's an infinite possibilities available in every moment, but we get to experience one of the options. And that's kind of like we're being delivered an experience in a way, and then we can choose how to, or we can kind of like be aware that it's an inside out creation, and that makes everything more effortless and easy. You know, we don't, easy in a way. And And when it's hard, I'm not saying that, you know, if you're fighting with your spouse, you know, that sucks, and that really sucks. That's why we're always pointing to this pre-existing fact, because while in the midst of fighting, there's a point there you're going to kind of like look at things, you know, and then it's good to know the fact that you're creating it.
So are you talking about having perspective? Because that's what I find it gives me, that in the midst of insecurity, or the midst of an argument, I've kind of got this bit of perspective now, that even when I'm caught up in that, I know that it doesn't need to be like this, that there's another option. Is that what you're talking about?
I like that a lot. Yeah, it's like a more rich perspective in a way. It's kind of like you realizing this helps you see the richness of your own perspective. Yeah, that you have the ability to look at things from any kind of angle you want.
What I also hear from you is choice. I know for me that beforehand, when I got caught up in things, you know, people might be saying, well, so what that, you know, this is coming from thinking. It's just, you're just adding a step, but surely that person's making me feel like this, or this situation's making me feel insecure. But what I hear from you is now you have choice in how you react, or how you show up in those situations.
That's a great question, because a lot of times, you know, I thought that I understood this when I heard it the first time, because I had my thing I used to say on stage, like, a circumstance is just a circumstance until you label it, you know. And then that was like, okay, so I have to reframe my thinking, you know, or I have to, when stuff happens, I have to think about it differently, and then I will feel good. Which sounds like a good idea, but you know, life simply doesn't work that way, because when how we feel is just an indicator of what's happening in that moment. It's just an indicator of what thoughts running through our minds in that specific moment. And there's nothing to do about that in order to change it. You know, trying to change the present is like, it's just adding more thought to it. It's just adding more. It's like trying to worry our way out of worrying, you know. That's just adding more thinking. That's why I'm constantly pointing towards this fact again, you know. Like you call the principle behind state of mind, and, you know, it's a principle, it just works like that.
So I want to ask you I want to get more into the relationship piece now, more specifically. And I was talking to a client the other day, and this client, he was in a relationship, and he was struggling. He was struggling with his partner. And I'd love to, you know, just throw an example out to you and just see what you would say, because I think it might be applicable to other people listening. You know, he was struggling with deciphering what to do with his partner. So he was in this relationship, and he said, sometimes, you know, I think, you know, I could love them and be with them forever, and it's great. And sometimes I think, you know, I've had enough, and I've been around this for a long time, and I just need to leave them. And he was really struggling to, like, well, what do I do? Which thoughts do I believe? What do I do with my thinking? What's going on? And I'd love to get, you know, your perspective on something like that, because I think it's a real life practical issue.
Totally. And it can be like, so that's what we do, right? We go into the idea that there's something we need to do in order to X, Y, Z, you know, in order to feel good a certain way. And I can only say that I can relate, you know. I can say that I can relate in the way that, well, I would tell him that when he is in his thinking, trying to figure out what to do in order to, feel good or have his girlfriends feel good or whatnot. That's just, it just means that in that specific moment, that's the kind of thinking he's experiencing. And seeing that for himself will have the implication, or kind of like, that he can notice that it'll pass. As simple as that. It's just a fact that it will pass. And he will fall back to the love and the present and a good state of mind with his girlfriend again, and when he's there, everything looks clear to him, he will fall back to a clear mind. And when he's there, it's not a problem anymore. It doesn't even cross his mind. And then that's a better moment to make decisions from, and he will know that for himself.
I'm smiling because you reminded me of a little rule, I should say, or a little thing that my fiance now, she was my girlfriend at the time, was we used to say to each other, which was, let's not make a big relationship decision when we're upset with each other.
Oh, that's amazing. And congratulations. I know I already told you, but I want to do it live as well. That's amazing. Don't make a decision what a great rule. That's kind of like what this understanding helps us do, is especially in relationships, is actually being able to shut up at the right times. It's like the ability to see to more clearly see when we're not clear-minded, kind of like be able to turn around or turn around before we go all the way to town into our negative spirals of insecure thinking. We can just be aware and observe it and go and kind of like we will be notified that it's going in the bad direction, homie, and then we can kind of like just wait it out in a sense.
But isn't that so funny? Like I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I wonder how many people listening to this have had that moment in a relationship where they're, maybe it's not an argument, maybe it's a strong discussion or whatever, and they're talking to their partner and they say something and they know as they're saying it, it's not a great thing to say, but it's almost like watching the words coming out of your mouth, knowing it's going to end badly. How many of us have done that so many times?
So true, so true.
So can we talk a little bit about, we talked a bit before, but I'd love to move on to commitment. And I think this is a very relevant topic for both of us right now, but I'd love for you to talk a bit about commitment for you and what's been shifting and changing for you and how you see that.
Cool. Like I mentioned earlier, being in the seduction community and the personal development community, and then building up a personal brand and yada yada, I get a lot of attention from girls, and I like that. And I travel a lot, I've basically it boils down to I'm scared of commitment, and just admitting that, has me sweating right now. So realizing that I'm creating this experience has me actually be able to say it and actually be able to be okay also in my insecurity. And so that was a huge game changer for me, because then all of a sudden, instead of avoiding something like a commitment, I can actually play with the idea, I can experiment, I can be open for it, just like I'm open for anything else. The world opens up, just realizing that it's an inside job, that it's my creation I'm perceiving. It sounds, yeah, I love that. It's again, and I'm going to paraphrase from what I hear, but tell me if this is right, is it sounds like before you'd have
some insecurity, you had some thoughts around commitment, which would make you feel uncomfortable, and how you interpreted that was, okay, must not get close to someone because getting close to someone is making me feel uncomfortable. Whereas now, because you realize that you're creating that feeling yourself, it's like, oh, that I don't need to push people away. I can experiment with this. Let's see what happens.
Totally. That's the cool thing is that the results showing up in my life is all automatic, you know. It's like this understanding takes care of whatever is showing up in my life, and then I can like look at it after the fact in retrospect and go and see, wow, this is happening now, you know. Like I used to be scared of commitment and afraid, and while being afraid, you know, acting from insecurity. It's much easier, effortless, and fun, loving to act from love, obviously, you know. Or it's all love, but you get my point.
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by love and acting from love?
I mean, if I'm living in a thought-generated experience from insecurity, if I have a lot of insecure thinking on my mind, that, you know, and then I project that insecurity, you know, that's what I'm going to see. I'm going to see an insecure world. I'm going to see a world where commitment is dangerous. And it's going to look dangerous to me 100%. But when realizing that danger is a thought created illusion, created for me in the moment and perceived by me in the same moment, it's kind of like pulls the rug under it, and it doesn't have that power anymore, you know. So that's why I said I can be scared of commitment, but kind of like at the same time, I can see that it's dropping. I can see that it's not dangerous. I can see that I'm okay. I can be okay and scared at the same time.
Yeah, it's great, and I can so relate to what you're saying. It's not about being perfect, and I think, you know, I spent some time in the self-development world as well. For me, it was always about getting somewhere to be the perfect guy or to be the best. And it sounds like what you're saying, which is similar to what I say too, is it's no longer about being perfect, but it's being okay with how we are. It's being okay with what shows up as trying to attain some kind of unattainable guy. And especially, I don't know, again, what you see, but I found certainly in relationships, if you're perfect, it's really hard to relate with perfect people. And in fact, I mean, just talking about commitment, I was talking to my girlfriend a month or so ago, and we were talking about it, and she was like, well, you seem so sure about us. And she was like, well, I'm not, you know, but I get scared. And I went, oh, no, I'm scared as well. And she went, really? I said, oh, yeah, of course, it's normal, but I just don't, you know, start thinking about those scared thoughts and get into it. And it was very strange, because it was in that moment that I felt that we connected a lot more, as opposed to, you know, if I was just this person who was just solid in my belief and never had an insecure feeling or anything like that, you know, it's harder to relate.
Oh, yeah, it can be so tiring to put on this show all the time. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. You know, but also doing my best, you know, we always do our best with the information we have at hand. So I'm not trying to like, you know, I'm also proud of my past, but I have been, when I look back now in retrospect, I can see that I had this way of being that I thought that I had to be when I was running, you know, conferences and workshops and seminars, and, you know, when I got a lot of attention, you know, that got to my head. And that was all also, you know, when I say the attention got to my head, what really happened is I created an experience for myself from the inside, and then, you know, experience that, perceive that as the way things should be. But when, yeah, you know, just like you said.
Because you were a mini celebrity at one point, right?
I wouldn't say that.
Well, you were quite well known. You know, you had a lot of people looking up to you, and like you said, you were at the front of the room. And
there, in certain situations, you know, it was like I was some kind of celebrity, because everyone pulled me in different directions. So in my mind, I had to manage everyone and please everyone, you know, and that can be a lot of managing for your thinking, when you think that, when you buy into the idea that you have to manage everyone else and their happiness. You know, so realizing this principles behind state of mind, it kind of makes you, I wouldn't say careless, but I would say careless about how other people are feeling, but in the most lovable, from the most lovable place, just from the understanding that there's nothing I can do in order to have you feel good, in a way. That sounds crazy when I say the words, because, you know, I obviously do my best in order for, you know, with the information I have in the moment. But when everything boils down, you know, 100% of our feelings just shows what thoughts is manifesting in the moment.
And do you find too that, because it can sound, like you say, it could sound quite cold what you're saying, but do you find that it's kind of having the opposite effect? You find that you're having a better experience, better relationship?
Yeah, totally, because and this is a great example for in relationship, you know. Whilst before I used to think that I needed to talk about the themes that they talked about, you know, or that's a polite thing to do, and then I was trying to please them, and all of a sudden we are engaged in some kind of contracting feeling where both is trying to get the wheel spinning, you know, while, you know, but it's like, but the whole entire wheel is a thought creation. Well, now it's just like realizing that the connection already is there, then the words become secondary, you know. It's like, what's behind the words? Where is this person coming from? And it's kind of like seeing. I experience that I see people from a different light, or try to see who really see them. You know, Avatar style. I see you see them. And I value that connection more than the topic of what we are speaking about, for example, you know. So then all of a sudden priorities changes.
I'm guessing that could be quite helpful for you as well, you know, with your living situation. We were talking earlier that you're now sharing with 3 other people. You used to live on your own, and I'm sure that brings different dynamics and different relationships there as well.
Definitely. We live a very interesting lifestyle. I'm kind of like this. I like to travel a lot. We have this home-free life where, well, not home-free, we have this home, but we're 4 people sharing a, what's this, 1 bedroom, or it was a big kitchen, big living room, big sleeping room, and a toilet. So, but we're 4 people at the moment. So there's a lot of, we're not much alone. But seeing this inside out nature of reality, that's a great way of building character and go through experiences together. Because we're constantly on top of each other in a small apartment, then normally that might be a lot of arguing, or a lot of like, back and forth. And it is here too, you know, or it's not a lot of arguing at all, but it's like, you know, I have thought sometimes that, if it would be about cleaning, or, you know, the toilet seat, or whatever people are thinking about, I can know that it's from me again, you know. It changes the whole dynamic of this organism that we're living in. It's like, it's a different frequency to play on, you know. we're taking things way less personal than when I used to live with a lot of people before, because it doesn't make sense to take things personal. Apparently, it doesn't make sense for my mind to take things personally anymore, because it's it's whatever the circumstance is, how I perceive it is all me.
And so you can still address those things, but doing it from a neutral place, as opposed to, like you said, making it about you. I can imagine people living to, like, it's about disrespecting you, disrespecting your time, disrespecting your space, or people can bring a lot of themselves into neutral situations.
True. That's what's cool. It's kind of like what you say about neutral. It's cool to see how, again, going back to what I said about being scared and okay at the same time, you're left with kind of like two options. You can engage with the danger, or you can engage with the okayness, and then the okayness always wins because it doesn't make sense to. It's like, do you want to take the stairway to heaven or to hell? It's just obvious.
Well, thank you so much, Morten. We're pretty much run out of time, but it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I know we've tried to record this, and I'm glad it's come together now, because it's been such a wonderful conversation. And I've certainly seen you shift so much, over the last year and a half. It's great to see that. If people want to learn more about you, I know you've got a podcast, you've got a YouTube channel, you've got all sorts of things going on. How can they do that?
Okay, so the easiest is to just go to my website. That's mortenhake.com, mortenhake.com. And from there, you can find my YouTube channels and my Facebook page and all that. Fantastic.
And I do strongly recommend people check that out. If people want to check out more about myself, again, it's the same thing. Go to my website, ankushjain.co.uk, ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk, and there's links to everything else. So thanks once again, Morten, for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure. I will see, or listeners will hear me next time via podcast, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you hear these. And I'm looking forward to the next conversation. Thanks, Morten.
Thank you so much, Ankush. It was awesome.
This was the Relationship Series podcast. If you like this episode, please share it and leave us your feedback online. Thanks for listening.